All right, everybody. We will get started. Marty, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Ankuma,
Aye.
Mr. Lawrence.
Here.
Mr. Reitinger,
Here.
and Mr. Webb.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, before we do remote participation, would you all stand and join us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. As I said, Justin's traveling, so he's asked for the ability to participate remotely. Could I get a motion to allow that, please?
Mr. Chairman, in accordance with School Board Policy 2.3B, I move to approve the participation of School Board Chair Justin Castillo by remote access to the school board meeting due to previous scheduled business trip.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion's passed. Now could I get a motion to adopt our agenda as slightly amended since we changed the order for the first two?
You on the launch?
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, now we'll move on to public comment. In accordance with School Board Bylaws 2.30, the time for each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. Additional written statements may be submitted to the clerk for dissemination to board members and for the record. Please, anybody who hasn't filled out a slip, I have 3. Please fill one out. You all have 3 minutes. Just state your name and address. If you could, either sit or stand near the microphone so that the camera can pick you up. So first we have Douglas Stevens, and then next Kate Karstens.
I guess I'll sit so I'm closer to the microphone. Hi, Douglas Stevens, and you wanted the address. We're at 612 Park Avenue, just down the road here. My wife Andrea is here with me, so hi. We've been in the city about a year, so I'm sorry I haven't met you before, but glad to be here. I want to talk to you about mindfulness. First of all, saying we're super impressed with the school system. So glad that our kids are part of it. We have Noah at TJ. We have Evie at Mount Daniel. And I applaud the board for your proactive seeking out ways to help our students deal with stress. It's an issue. I watched the tape of the May 31st school board meeting in which the Falls Church psychologist walked you all through a practice session. And as I watched that, I was struck by how that practice session followed the outline of Buddhist meditation. As you'll recall, she had you, assume a certain position and posture with your body. She had you close your eyes. She rang a bell, had you focus on your breathing, find where it was in your body, focus on that, use that as an anchor to, help get, remove distracting thoughts. And you did that for a while. She rang a bell, brought you back out of it. So because that so closely followed the outline, I started doing a little looking into what exactly is mindfulness. I hadn't heard of it before. So with a little research, I focused my research on exactly what the Falls Church psychologist cited as the source for the specific mindfulness you're doing here, which is the Mindful Schools organization, as you recall. And she also said that Jon Kabat-Zinn was the father. She called him like the father of modern mindfulness, and she cited him on one of your slides. So I focused, let's find out what he himself says about it. And found something that was kind of eye-opening. I'm going to read you a quote from Kabat-Zinn himself. At the heart of mindfulness-based stress reduction is an experiment to see whether we can take the essence of Buddhist meditation practice and somehow make it accessible to people who would not find it through a traditional Buddhist or spiritual path. He writes in the Contemporary Buddhism Journal that he conceived of the idea to start this practice during a vision that he had on a meditation retreat, and that vision inspired him to create this, to bring Buddhist meditation to, quote, those who would never come to a Zen center. He goes on to talk about how, as he developed the practice, he, quote, bent over backwards to present it in a way that did not appear Buddhist at all, because, quote, that would have undermined our attempts to present it as a legitimate element of mainstream medical care. So I only have 3 minutes. I won't go further, but I will leave papers that have quite a few quotes from him himself and many other proponents. These are all quotes from proponents of the mindfulness stress reduction that you're using. And I think as you look at it, it'll become very apparent that despite best intentions, it actually is a spiritual practice. Is that my time?
Yes.
Okay, so since it's a spiritual practice, I just simply ask that the board not allow it in our schools. I don't think it has a place there. If you do choose to allow it, then my wife and I would simply ask that you put up a system in place to notify parents ahead of time and give us the option to opt out of it. All right, thank you. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. All right, next is Kate Karstens and then Allison Kutchma.
Thanks.
Kate Karstens. I live at 322 Grove Avenue. Good evening. I am the editor-in-chief of The Lasso. We are the voice of the students of George Mason High School, and I am speaking on behalf of The Lasso and all publications at Mason in order to repeal Board Policy 9.46, a policy that condones and encourages censorship. This policy of prior review serves only to cripple our newspaper and fails to educate student journalists at George Mason. We have countless community members who support us, some of whom are here tonight. The policy currently in place stifles a student's ability to report on breaking news, as we must first check with the school's principal, who is our editor according to the policy, before we publish anything. It does not, as the policy states, quote, encourage an appreciation for the Constitution. How can I be expected to practice journalism after high school if I have never practiced without the restraint of censorship? As educational leaders, you are aware that the best way to learn is through experience, and this policy prohibits that. Policy 9.46 also holds the school district responsible for any and all mistakes made by students. This means that if someone wanted to sue The Lasso for whatever reason, the school would be directly responsible and be the party faced with the suit. Under the policy I've written, the responsibility of the paper is taken away from the school and placed in the hands of the students, under the supervision of the advisor. And for the record, there has never been a recorded case of a high school newspaper that has a policy of free press being sued in the United States. Countless states and surrounding schools have made the monumental decision to give their students the freedoms they deserve. Every public school in Washington, D.C., the entire state of Maryland, Illinois, and California. There are more. Chantilly High School has been operating under a free press policy for 5 years now, and the paper, yearbook, and individual writers have been award winners of the Columbia Scholastic Press Association for years. We belong to the same association, as do publications across the country, but we are a small minority of those under the restrictions of prior review. As a result, we struggle each year to place among large publications or earn awards because we cannot publish pieces that make the impact that CSPA looks for. Awards aside, we want to publish pieces that matter to our students. This policy deters us from considering sensitive topics. Teen pregnancy and drug and alcohol abuse impact my peers, and there are countless stories that deserve to be written concerning these topics, but under this policy, they cannot. Organizations such as the Student Press Law Center, Journalism Education Association, and National Coalition Against Censorship all rally behind this cause for free expression through school publications. Journalism educators and judges around the country have urged schools to support and foster students' free expression because it is key to persuading young people, quote, that our Constitution is a living reality, not just parchment preserved under glass. Last year, Madison High School students fought the same fight that I fight today and won. Madison is ranked 3rd in Virginia by the U.S. News and World Report. These large schools that we consider to be our peers, why are we behind the times? What are we waiting for? Why not Virginia, and why not Falls Church? Falls Church City takes pride in their students, as they should. It's difficult to hear administrators talk about how proud of us they are when they have no trust in us to publish our own perspective without approval. Give us a reason to make you proud, trust your students, and trust this paper. Repeal Policy 9.46 and make history. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Allison Kutchma, and then if anybody else wants to speak after, you're more than welcome.
Good evening. My name is Allison Kutchma, and I've lived in the community for about 15 years, and I put 3 special education students through the system. And I've been concerned over the last decade about how the full school board gains access to what goes on in special education. There's various ways that happens, but I'm concerned about that, so I'm taking it upon myself to address that issue in a number of ways, and I only have 3 minutes, so I'm not going to detail those. But I'm going to be communicating with the board directly about those issues, written and verbally. One of the things I'm also doing is I'm videotaping the Special Education Advisory Committee meetings, because so many parents with students with disabilities aren't able to attend. So if you want to look at those tapes during the public comment is when parents bring their concerns. So one issue I want to bring to you tonight is I'm concerned that Falls Church City Public Schools only has a part-time special education director. I think it sends not a great message to the community in Falls Church about how we feel about our students with disabilities with only a part-time director. She does a job share as principal of our preschool. And when I went to the Special Education Advisory Committee meeting on Monday, she commented, and I know she's done this before, that she substitute teaches. So when the preschool can't find a teacher, our director of special education, who we pay $150,000 plus benefits, is being a substitute teacher at our preschool and going on field trips, and she's not available for special education meetings because she's teaching at the preschool. And if you noticed, on Tuesday at the work session, our Liz Germer made a stunning presentation about the preschool and the level of detail that she knew about the classrooms and the technology and the elephant room and the fox room and what they do with the smart boards. I mean, she really is on top of the preschool, and that's great. But obviously to do that, it takes some level of effort. So I would be curious to know how the level of effort between being a director of special education is divided. And I'm concerned about that, and the message that says sends to the community of students with disabilities, given the fact that the school board disbanded the committee last year. And on top of that 18 months ago, there was a great survey that our school district did to collect information about gaps in services for students with disabilities. And it's been 18 months. And there is no plan to address those issues, or there hasn't been a staff meeting to talk about with teachers about what we could do to improve things for students with disabilities. So I would like to ask you that you consider having a full-time special education director, and I would like to ask you to address and have someone look at the results from that survey. We spent money on that survey, and I would like to use that to improve our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. One more, Shay Wakely.
Sit here, right? Okay. Good evening. My name is Shay Wakely, and I'm a kindergarten para at Mount Daniel. I'm here to ask that you find the money somewhere to find subs for kindergarten and first grade classroom paras. I know when you took the funding away for subs for paras this year, you probably didn't realize that it affected disproportionately Mount Daniel, as we have 17 classrooms with 17 paras. It is unconscionable that you would take away the funding this year when enrollment has been at an all-time high and the number of kindergarten classrooms were reduced from 9 to 8. It is first and foremost an indisputable safety hazard to ask a single teacher to care for 24 5- and 6-year-olds single-handedly. It also places a burden on paras who now have to weigh whether or not it's worth taking the day off for a doctor's appointment or a sick day while leaving their teaching partners all alone. Please find money somewhere, because it is a desperate situation right now.
Okay, thank you. All right, do we have anybody else, whether or not you filled out a slip? Okay, we'll close public comment. Here, you want to give Justin a call? All right, while we get Justin on the phone, what we're going to talk about now is the superintendent search process, and this is specifically for the, for the permanent superintendent search, not the interim. As, I can't remember whether it was the last meeting or the meeting before, we had agreed that what we're going to do is meet specifically on this, well, help me clarify. We're going to meet, once the vacancy announcement for the interim closes, we're going to meet that first Tuesday to talk about the interim. Do we also want to have the permanent on there as well? I would tend to think not, because we're going to have enough on our plate with just the interim, and that's only going to be in 2 weeks. But just remind me if I'm remembering that wrong.
Justin, are you here? Are you on the line?
Yeah, I'm on the line.
Okay, just want to be sure.
Okay. Can you hear us?
I am. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Anyway, we're just talking about the search process for the permanent superintendent.
Okay.
Now, does anybody feel that we need the permanent superintendent on the meeting after the interim closes?
Could you just rephrase the question, Mr. Chair? I didn't get the whole thing.
Well, when we last met and we talked about the process for the interim, we all agreed that we wanted to have a meeting on the CVs that we had gotten, the first available meeting after it closed on Friday. And we had a meeting scheduled already for the next Tuesday, and frankly, there was nothing on the agenda. So we put the interim on there. I guess my time's up.
Yeah.
Sorry. But I don't recall us talking about putting anything for the permanent search on that same agenda. And I just want to make sure I'm remembering it right, since this is something we all need to keep straight. I see no reason for that. But I seriously want to make sure that I'm describing what we agreed to correctly so that no one's surprised.
Well,
Michael?
I guess my question would be, we're running 2 parallel tracks, aren't we?
Yes.
So what stops us from discussing any updates or where we are in the process of the superintendent search, whether it's the recruitment of or the decision as to the process as to how we're going to do it, who we're going to do it with, what outreach has been made to either VSBA or others. I guess that would be my question.
Right. No, there'd be nothing at all to keep us from having it on the agenda. I just, as I was going through the two, because they are parallel and they kind of intersect, but they don't intersect, I just wanted to make sure that we all knew what we're doing, because this process is going to be, a bit convoluted, because we're going to be working on one at the same time we're prepping for the other. But no, there'd be nothing at all. If we wanted to wait until, the week before, and then if there was a reason to have the permanent on there, we could have the permanent on there.
I guess to the extent that further on the agenda, we have some items, are we going to discuss them today?
Oh, yes. I mean, everything on the agenda we're going to discuss. I'm talking
okay.
about the meeting. The vacancy closes on the 21st. So we have, and that's a Friday, we have a meeting the next Tuesday where we're going to go through all the CVs that we had, and we're, getting them, and we're going through them as we get them as well. That meeting was strictly on the interim. We can always add something on the permanent search if there's something we need to discuss. I just did not think we had any intention from our last meeting to put something on there now, and I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on that. Adding something, we absolutely can, but right now, the permanent is not on that day.
I would suggest we give ourselves the option to discuss.
Oh, the option's always there.
There. Okay.
Right.
So,
But, yeah, that's not the question. I just wanted to make sure that I had not forgotten something, because we have a fast process on the interim, and we've got a different process on the other, and we're going to talk about the permanent now. Okay.
I'd simply say I agree with Michael that I think the interim ought to be on every agenda until we pick an interim, and the search process for the permanent ought to be on every agenda. It sort of be taken off if we don't have it, but I would think there'd be, in many cases, a chance to do an update if there had been any changes in the past week. So for me, by default, there ought to be a discussion about any things that have come up or decisions that need to be made on the superintendent search process in essentially every meeting. But I don't think we got to that level of detail, and so I'm
Right.
comfortable with what you suggested.
Yeah, no, updates, absolutely, every single meeting, honestly, whether or not it's listed as a separate item on the agenda. We all need those. So, Justin, any comments?
Sorry, I've got a little background noise. I think we need to keep moving them both along. I think the big thing with the permanent right now is the selection of the outside advisor, and then waiting for the resumes of the interims to come in after the notice closes.
Okay, then let's just go on and talk about the firms that we've already gotten proposals from. I assume everybody's had a chance to at least go through them quickly. I guess, to me, there are a few things we need to talk about tonight. A is this a good enough universe that we don't need to go out and get more? Secondly, we talked about this last time, should we ask them to come in and do presentations in person? I mean, to me, those are two things we need to figure out, because we would have to get them on our schedule if they need to come in. Any thoughts about either? Alex?
As long as it doesn't cost us any money for them to come in, I'd love to talk to them.
Well, I think we need to ask, and, two of them are at least
Two of them
in.
fairly local.
Well, it's funny, two of them are based in Illinois, but,
They have people-
Tony said they have people here. So I can't imagine this is something that's new and different to them. So, my inclination is I absolutely want them to come in, because paper is nice, but this is probably 80% boilerplate for everybody they send something to. Maybe I'm cynical.
I agree. I think it's good to have this, to at least get this as a starting point, but I think I would like to have them come in, and so we can ask questions one-on-one with them versus just going by what they've sent us in proposals.
Right, okay. Anybody have a problem with that?
My only concern is the speed of the process, and I'd like to get a search contractor on as quickly as possible. I was kind of hoping we could do it tonight, but I understand the reluctance to doing it without a verbal presentation from the three, at least by telephone. My request would be that if we're going to do that, we schedule it next week.
Next week, yeah. I was just
Well,
gonna
we
say the same
should
thing.
ask them, and it'll partly be a test of their interest in it. So,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, and if,
I would say that we should, if they're not willing to do it, then we should just proceed without them.
right, and if they need to do it remotely, we can let them do that, but they do need to do something. Okay, so that's one thing. Does everybody feel that these are good enough and we have enough that we don't need to go out and look for any more? Because there are other firms, and I know, Justin, you've reached out to some, but this is what we've got. I mean, to me, it seems like it's a pretty good group, and I'm not sure what we would get from looking further other than just more as opposed to better.
I mean, in a nutshell, I'd say you've got VSBA, who's Virginia-centric,
Right.
and then the other two are national.
Right.
So that just about, for me, that sort of covers it. Could you get more? I guess so, but would it add any value? I don't know.
And I would have thought, and for me, if others were interested in actually working with us to do this, I think by this point,
They could have put it
they
there.
would have put something out to us by now. So I think we have three good proposers right here that we just need to have those conversations with them, and the sooner the better. Next week of having those conversations, that we can move forward with the process and get them on the ground and running.
Okay, so we'll proceed with these and tell them we want to hear from them one way or another next week.
Only thing I'd add is that if Justin's reached out to someone and they submit a proposal and are also happy to talk next week, I'd be happy to hear them as well. But I'm comfortable in proceeding with the three proposals that we've got and picking the best.
Okay. All right, Justin, any comment?
Yeah, that's that's it. We've got all the, I thought this was a good basket, and I don't think we'll get a whole lot of additional mileage out of more.
Okay, one thing I would like to do, and somebody tell me how hard this would be. From the last search, can we find out what the expenses were? Because that's the one wild card, is, you know, if you're flying people in, you know, putting them up, if you've got a big group, I would just be curious as to what the expenses were last time, because everybody gives us a fee and then they estimate, here's an idea for expenses, but honestly, it could be, you know, from here to here. And I think we need at least to know what it was last time to give us some ideas to what the real cost would be, because right now, we don't know.
Are we fronting this presentation, the cost of this presentation?
Are we what?
Are we going to be fronting this?
Fronting?
I mean, for the,
Are we going to be paying for the presentations?
Oh, I certainly would not support that.
Oh, okay.
No,
I
no,
just
no. I'm
wanna make
talking
sure.
about when you read through their proposals, they all say, here's our fee, here are the kinds of expenses you could have, but then they all say, it really depends on what kind of thing you want to do. Like one said, they can do the background check. You know, my notes had a question, do we have to have somebody else do the background check? But it comes down to, if you've got a nationwide search and you have 5 people and they're all from, you know, the West Coast, your cost to fly your front runners in, if you decide to fly them all in, is going to be very different than if we've got everybody who's based in Virginia and they just want to drive up here and then we need to put them up for a night. That's my point.
Okay, so at least what you're asking of Lisa is not as a condition to having them come over.
No, it's more
We
just
anticipate the costs, actual costs from
from last time.
from 2012.
To give us an idea as to what it might cost this time.
Oh,
And
so
obviously,
I
that's
can
just
have
almost
Hunter
like
do
a
that.
control, and then we'll hear from them next week or whenever they show up to tell us what those true costs will be, because those will be part of the questions.
well, they've given us their estimate. My point is, it's an estimate, and they can't know how much we're going to want to do in a certain way to know what our expenses would be. They could say, if you do this, it'll cost you, you know, X per day or X per hour. But then it comes down to, do we choose that? Do we spend 2 days doing it? Do we spend an hour doing it? So they can't really tell us, but we went through this 4 or 5 years ago. So we at least should know that number. That's my point.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else on the search firms? Okay, Justin, any comment?
Well, I mean, I've seen, I think some of this is within our control. Obviously, I have, when I was looking at some of the companies to approach, there was more than one instance of school districts basically getting expenses that were equal to the cost of the job itself. So, I think that's kind of a worst case scenario, but I think in addition to finding out what the costs have been, it may be worth asking, what can we do to reduce, I think travel expenses are the big one, so.
Yeah.
Some of that's just careful vetting.
Well, careful vetting, and what we may do is say, until we get a short list of, no more than 3, we won't bring anybody out. But yeah, a lot of it is in our control, and it's just a question of knowing in advance, because let's face it, we don't have a whole lot of money floating around. So, anything else?
I'd make one request of the chair or vice chair, and that is that since we are going to hear presentations next week, I'd like to be in a position to make a decision next week. Is there a possibility to check some of the references, certainly for the 2 private firms? Because I think both the private firms listed
provided.
references. It would just be useful to hear some background, and maybe we could find out how much those references paid in expenses and that would be some additional data as well.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the more we can get going faster, the better.
And I thought VSBA also gave some school systems that they've, I guess, very fairly recently did some school searches for too. I think we can.
Yeah, they gave us a long list
possibly
with
follow up
names.
too for the references for all 3 of them. If
I think that's valuable. I was less concerned with VSBA, since my understanding is we used VSBA last time.
Before,
so,
yeah.
So we can talk to our own people about how that worked. But I think more recent references for all three would be a valuable thing to have.
Yeah, okay. Then we just have to figure out who would be the one making the calls, but yeah, that makes sense, get it going faster. Okay.
Yeah, we can do that.
All right. Anything else on that before we move into closed? All right, seeing nothing. Could I get a motion to move into our closed session?
Chair, pursuant to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, I move that the board convene a closed meeting for the following purpose: to discuss or consider the identified subject matter. Personnel under Section 2.2-3711, subsection A, Section 1, in particular, review of candidates' resumes for interim superintendent, and legal matters under Section 2.2-3711, Section A, subsection 7, in particular, sharing of information after consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by the public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel, in particular, the Mount Daniel Project.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. We'll give it to Lawrence. Could you call a roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Ankuma,
Aye.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
Mr. Reitner,
Yes.
and Mr. Webb.
Yes.
All right, and before we move into close, just let the public know that the reason Dr.
Shouldn't Justin vote as well, since he's...
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Castillo.
No, I.
Thank you.
All right, just letting people know, Dr. Jones is not here tonight because she had previously scheduled a trip to her new district to hopefully find a home for herself and her mom. So otherwise, she would be here tonight. And we're going to do the closed session in here, so we would ask the public to please go home and have dinner.
Move to reconvene.
Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, we'll give that to Mr. Ankuma. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we're back in open session. Could somebody certify the closed meeting, please?
Mr. Chair, whereas the Falls Church Public School Board has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, and whereas Section 2.2-3711, Section B of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this school board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, now therefore be it resolved that the Falls Church Public School Board hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, 1, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirement by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which the certification applies, and 2, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Marty?
Okay, Mr. Ankuma,
Aye.
Mr. Castillo,
Aye.
Ms. Gill,
Aye.
Mr. Lawrence.
Yes.
Mr. Reitinger.
Yes.
And Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Trying to think of what we can say in public. We just met to talk about the interim search and how we're going to proceed. Phil, you had something you want to say?
So I was just going to suggest that, and I also am trying to be careful in terms of what I say, that I think it's appropriate for the board to consider whether or not to, without prejudicing the question of whether there'll be a search committee for the permanent search, whether it would be appropriate to ask 2 members to conduct initial, perhaps phone interviews with selected candidates prior, so that the board could then do full interviews with them. Because by doing it with 2 members, there would not be meetings, and it would be procedurally easier and probably better for candidates and faster for the board. So I'd suggest that's something we ought to consider.
Okay. Anybody else? I mean,
No objections?
personally, I mean, to me, the idea of considering, I like, I'm less comfortable with voting on it tonight since we haven't really had any chance to think about it or talk about it. But we do meet again next week.
one of the things that I would think would be useful is my understanding is when the search for the full superintendent happened last time around, there was a group of 3 school board members that participated in that. I'd like to find out a little bit more procedurally about how that was managed, and such that, you know, maybe we don't need, maybe we need more than 2 to go ahead and do this. Although, you know, I think it's something we just need to explore a little bit more.
Yeah.
I'm certainly comfortable in waiting, but I wanted to surface the question, and I think it's, again, something that, as difficult it is to try to do things on this kind of timeline, you know, we ought to work to resolve next week so that the work could proceed more quickly. But I'm perfectly comfortable to wait. Just would suggest that it be on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay. Yeah, and for anybody in the public who's watching, what we're trying to do is balance having a process that moves quickly, keeps confidentiality, and at the same time meets all the legal requirements for meetings and open meetings. And when you're trying to do those 3 things together, logistically, it just gets kind of tough. So that's why we're having this discussion. Anything else about the interim or permanent search? No? Okay. In that case, we will stand adjourned unless anybody has anything else to say. Nope, we're adjourned. Thank you.